Okay, so we will talk about batch, Apex, in Salesforce, or you can say async process or asynchronous Apex, and then anything is fine. See, basically there are two modes in which we usually execute our code or we process the data. One is the real time, another is the asynchronous, means synchronous or asynchronous. There are two ways by which we process the data. So understand the need. As Salesforce runs on the like we have the governor limits, we enforce the governor limits. Salesforce runs on multi-tenant environment, means we have the shared resources. So that's the reason Salesforce enforce the governor limits, so we have to be in those limits. For example, let's say when you have the large amount of data set, like you want to process with millions of records all together, you cannot go with the as with the synchronous apex, means with real time, because as you have the large data set, it will take more time. And Salesforce, even like we or customers expect the response in quick time. So when we have the large data set, we go with the asynchronous apex. When we have limited data set, means up to 50,000 records we want to process, we can go with the synchronous apex. Means it's not like when we have 50,000, 40,000 records, we cannot go with the asynchronous apex, asynchronous process. Still we can go, but as per the system design which we have, Salesforce suggests if you have up to 50,000 records, you can easily use synchronous way. We have the normal apex, we have triggers. If you have large data set, a long running process, go with the batches. A part of that batch, we have the future method, we have the queuable apex. These are the things which we run in terms of asynchronous apex. Okay, so let's see what is batch apex. So batch apex is the asynchronous process which runs or which we use to execute the large data set, large number of records. We have the different methods and different approach. Another thing, it's all real time. It's a backend running jobs which will run in the backend when we execute. So we have certain methods which we use on batch. We talk about methods of batch. We have start method, we have execute method, and last one is finish method. Start method will return you the records. It will return you data set or records of any object from Salesforce itself. Another thing is execute method. It will process the records or data. It will process the records or data, means it will execute all the records. Another is the future method. Sorry, not future, it's a finish method. And finish method basically will execute at the end. It will execute at the end, and here we write the like post commit logic, or if you want to send email notifications, then you can send. For example, let me share some requirements in which we can use the batches. Let's say you have the legacy data system. Legacy data system means you have like the old data base, or the you are using Salesforce since years, maybe 10 years, 20 or 15 years. But you see there are certain records in contact object or in any object which are not in the use or not active. For example, you want to perform some clean jobs, you want to perform or you want to delete the records which are not in use. Okay, for example, let's say delete all the contact records which are not in use in last 5 years. We want to delete all the records, all the contacts which are not being used in 5 years. Means earlier to that, for example, which example will be another thing you can say. Right now people are not using, but before 5 years these records were active or were in use. So we want to clear the data, we want to like clean, perform the clean jobs. So what we can do, we can write the batch, we can make the queries in a start method, and we can return the records to the execute method. For example, let's say you have got 1,000 records of contact which are not in use in last 5 years or which are inactive. So your start method will return 1,000 records to the execute method. So start method will run only once, no mean how many records it will return. It will only run once in a transaction. But execute method will run frequently, many times. For example, let's say when you have 1,000 records, so internally it will be going to divide the chunks into 200 records each. There will be 5 chunks for 1,000 records. Means in first chunk it will execute in first chunk it will execute 200 records. Again in second chunk it will execute next 200 records. Third chunk 200 means 5 chunks. Another challenge will be here, as batches are stateless, means you won't be able to maintain the state of your batch. So for that we have to implement another interface to maintain the state. We have database dot stateful interface which we implement on the batch class, so that our batch should be stateful. Stateful or stateless means, let me explain that. Fourth chunk again 200, and fifth chunk again 200. So when it will execute the first chunk, it will move to the second. When it will move to the second chunk, the same moment it will forget like what all records were processed in the first chunk. When it will move to the third chunk, here again it will forget what all records are processed or have been processed in first and second chunk. Means when it will come to the first fifth chunk, it will remember only the fifth chunk records, means 200 records. It will forget, it will lose the state of other 800 records. That is the meaning of stateless. So we have to make it stateful. When we make it stateful, we maintain the state of the batch. We can track all the records, like what all records have been processed in all the chunks in first, second, third, fourth, or fifth. Because as I said, we want to delete all the records which are inactive in 5 years, last 5 years. And we, before we actually delete those, we want to send one email notification to the owner of those records, like these records are not in use in last or since last 5 years. If these are not relevant, we will be going to delete those. If you want these record are in use or can be in use, so that make sure you change or modify anything, so that we avoid the deletion. Okay, for that, in finish method, inside this method we will be going to send the email notification to those 1,000 contacts owners or the users, that by maintaining some message like these records are inactive, so that if you think it's or these are not in use, we will delete those. Else do some processing on those, so that we can avoid the deletion. That is the cycle or the process of execution of start, execute, and finish method. When we write the batch, we implement the database.batchable interface to make it batch. Otherwise it will be a normal class. So database.batchable interface contains three methods: start, execute, and finish. As per the interface rules, when we implement any interface, we have to provide definition for all the methods of batch. Means if we try to use only two methods, start and execute, and we avoid writing finish method, we won't be able to save. As per the interface rules and regulations, we have to provide definition for all the methods of any interface. So it's mandated to have all the methods, and in the entire cycle, start and finish method will execute only once, and execute method will run many times depending on the data size or the chunks. So let's move to the code, how we write the batch, or how we can perform the logic. Now I will give a simple example. Let's say you have maybe 1,000 records, maybe 50,000 records, 60,000 records. You want to update any field. Maybe let's say you want to update description of all the accounts or all the contacts or all the opportunities with the batch. So I will write the batch class where I will query all the accounts, and I will update the description field of all accounts. Let's move to the code quickly. Let me write the batch. We will create the simple class, update account description batch. Save it. As I said, it will be normal class, but we have to implement database.batchable interface to make it batch apex. Implements database dot batchable. So we have to implement this interface, database dot batchable. Now if I'll try to save it, I won't be able to save. You can see it's saying no. We have to actually provide the parameter in that. There is one interface parameter which we need to add. I will show you how we can add that as object. Now let's save it. It will give the error again. It will ask for all the methods of the interface. You can see this class must implement the method, this start method, execute, and finish. As these methods belong to the interface, so we cannot save if we avoid any method. So we have to add all the methods. So quickly let's add the method public. There will be some return type of the start method. You can use, there are basically two types: database dot query locator and iterator. So we will be going to use database dot query locator. Start all the methods, start, execute, and finish method will contain one attribute that will be database dot batchable context. That is the class which we have to pass here. Database dot batchable context, dbbc. You can put any attribute name. Let's say database context. As I said earlier, start method will return you all the records of any object where you want to process the logic. So let's return the records. For that, we can either directly write the query, or we can directly return database dot get query locator. And inside that, either we can write the query here, else we can write here. Let's say account list account equals to select id comma description from account. Put it here. Okay. Now let's move to the execute method. Public void execute. As I said, it will, all the methods will have this parameter. It will be common, and it will have one more additional parameter that will be list account or list of the objects. End of the time we will write the last method. Last method means finish. Public void finish. Again it will have this parameter. This is mandatory. So your start method will be going to return the 1,000 records or whatever the number of records you have in the account object in this query to this execute method. Here you can process your logic. Let's process the logic. If this list is not equal to null and dot size is greater than 0, we will process the logic here for count objcc list account. Let's update something into the description. Dot description, let's say Grovia information. I work in Grovia information technologies, and use the update. Here we can use either directly update or we can use database class as well. Database dot update. Here we have to pass the list which we want to update. Let's try to save. If we have any error, it will give the error, else it will save. Let's see, it's showing some error at line number 6. Argument must be inline query. All right, so we have to pass this query directly here like this. Comment. How you can execute the batch? We have database dot execute, and here we have to pass the instance of this class. So directly I can pass new like this. I can pass, or first I can create the instance like this, obj batch equal. Have this if like job is executed successfully, so even you can monitor the job, you can check whether job is executed or not from the quick finds. Search for jobs. Here you will see apex jobs. My class name was this. It's saying completed, status is completed, means we will have the updated description. Let's see in few accounts. I work in Grovia Information Technologies. Similarly, I work in Grovia Information Technologies. Another thing, we can also schedule the batch if needed. As I said, I gave you the requirement. We have to delete the records which are inactive or not in use. So how you can schedule? Go to the Apex classes. Here you see scheduled Apex. So here we can schedule the apex, but before that we have to create batch scheduler. Means there will be one more class, update account scheduler. Here we have to implement one interface. Let me check which interface we have to use here to schedule. And we will be going to write the we will be going to execute our method inside that. So let me particular time, or when we have actually large database system which we want to run or execute, we use the batch apex and the schedulable. A part of that, we also have the future method and queuable. Future and queuable, we like use both the methods for the again when we think we will have the sources in future, but resources are not available at a time, we use future and queuable. So future method will have the certain restrictions, like it won't return you anything. When we write any future method, it won't return list of contact you cannot pass. Another thing is futures are not trackable, but queuables are trackable. Like you can do similar activities in future and queuable. The major difference is queuables are trackable. You'll get the job ID, you can track those. Another the difference with the future is, or queuable and future is, you cannot track your future jobs or future methods are not trackable. Another thing about the batch are, you can have 100 batch in the queue, because maybe like you had written many jobs on different objects. So when you will be going to schedule those or execute those, because it's a long running process, so you can have up to 100 batches in queue. 5 jobs can be active at a time. No more than 5 jobs can be active, only 5 jobs can be active. And in the queue you can have up to 100 jobs, 100 batch jobs. Okay, so that's all about the